came here as a cardiology fellow many years ago and have really built up an international reputation in coronary physiology and structural heart disease. Tell us a little bit about that process for you and how the fellowship helped launch you into that career.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So actually, I'm from the Northeast, and my wife, who's a physician also, we met in medical school in the Northeast, and neither of us had been to California, or we'd been here but hadn't spent much time here, and thought that we'd come out for a few years for our training, and that was more than 25 years ago now. And so I started as a resident, and then during residency, got the chance to interact with some of the faculty in cardiology, and that really spawned my interest in cardiology and in clinical research. And I owe it to some great mentors, people like Paul Yock and Alan Young and others who helped guide me through that process as a fellow, and then the transition from fellowship to faculty. And I think that's really one of the special things about Stanford are the mentors, the people who are looking out for you and helping you make the next step and reach your goals.
I love that. I love that answer. And some of the mentors that you point out, like Paul Yock, I mean, he is in cardiology, but he wears many hats. He's in biodesign, et cetera. Maybe talk a little bit about how Stanford works in terms of interacting across disciplines and across schools even.
Often we're asked, like, why have you stayed here for so long? And I think that there's really two reasons. One are the people, and the other is the environment. And as I mentioned, Stanford is really special because of these mentors, these people who have been very successful and are very interested in helping, grow the next generation of physician scientists. In addition, there are terrific collaborators, both within the division, within your specific section that you're interested in, for me, interventional cardiology, but also throughout cardiology, and then across the spectrum too. As you mentioned, I mean, we have the Cardiovascular Institute, the biodesign program, biomedical engineering. All of this is very closely intertwined with a lot of cross collaboration. I think it's one of the special things about Stanford is the medical center, is right on campus within the undergrad and all the other graduate schools. And so that really fosters this kind of collaboration, and that gets to the environment, I think, not only within the Stanford community, but also being in Silicon Valley. There's this, enthusiasm and energy, the venture capital, community and startup environment. People are really trying to innovate, and that fosters, I think, across the cardiology side of things too, the desire to, develop the next great device or the next treatment or discover the next gene or whatever.
Talk a little bit about your current research and where you hope to take it and what you've learned and the role that Stanford has played in that.
I remember as a chief resident, I was interested in cardiology and getting involved in interventional cardiology. And I met with Paul Yock at that time, and he had just started working with this new pressure wire in the animal lab that we have here in the division. And the plan was to transition that to some first studies in humans in the United States. And he welcomed me to be involved in that, and I started getting some experience. He introduced me to the two leaders in Europe, Nico Piles and Bernard de Bruyne, and I was able to travel over there and spend time in their labs, getting some experience. And all of these interactions and collaborations allowed me to, launch my research career. As a junior faculty member, I was able to obtain a grant with the help of, again, my mentors, a K-23 award. And part of that was working in transplant patients. And Hannah Valentine, who was a faculty member at that time and a leader in that area, again, provided great mentorship in helping me to, do some very early studies in transplant patients with coronary physiology. And this wasn't necessarily her interest, but again, she allowed me that latitude, as great mentors do, and helped me grow in that way. And then once you get the ball rolling, things just sort of go from there. And I've been lucky to again be involved in some multi-center trials, and have some leadership role there. And each time you get a little more experience and learn a little more, and it helps you make that next step. And so it's been very enjoyable. I think the interaction with the fellows is a key component of this. They keep us on our toes, and it's great having them involved in the research program. They always have new ideas that we haven't thought of, which we really appreciate, and I think it helps grow things in the right direction.
You've mentored many general fellows and also interventional fellows. Talk about your role as a mentor, and let's speak a little bit more about the role that the fellows play in your own research program.
One of the most satisfying things about academic medicine and cardiology in particular is the chance to interact with just, brilliant, young, interested, enthusiastic trainees. And so I think that's something that we all relish, and that's why we stick around, and that's why we get up each morning. And so that's really one of the best parts of being at Stanford. And so I've enjoy having fellows involved in research, and it can extend across sort of a spectrum. We have some data from multi-center trials that we can analyze retrospectively, and so if a fellow has a certain idea about what he or she would like to look at, oftentimes we have a database where we can plug in and try to answer that question. Also, the VA database, the CART database, is a really great resource that we've been using, and fellows have been involved looking at that and publishing some interesting papers. We do some single center clinical trials too. You and I are interacting on a study looking at PCSK9 inhibitors early after heart transplant and the effects on vascular function. And I think that is going to yield some interesting data. And again, there's room for fellows to be involved in that program and some of the sub-studies. And then finally, we have a great animal lab with a full cath lab as well as surgical suite, where we can do large animal studies, sheep and pigs, and looking at coronary physiology in that area. And so there's a lot of different avenues for the fellows to pursue, and I welcome being involved with them in those pursuits.
One of the questions we always get asked is how is the fellowship busy enough? Will the fellows get enough procedures? Will they see enough stuff? And so maybe you can speak to that.
We have a very active cath lab program, both at Stanford and at the VA. We were one of the first 10 sites in the US to do TAVR back in 2008. And we've continued to grow that program. We now do more than 300 TAVRs a year. We also have an active program in transcatheter mitral and tricuspid valve interventions. My colleagues, David Lee and Rahul Sharma, have been leading that effort. We have a very active complex coronary program. My colleague Jennifer Tremmel heads up the CTO program, as well as the Women's Heart Health program. And then, of course, coronary physiology and imaging has been of key interest. And so we're involved in clinical trials in those areas and looking at newer areas like angiography-derived fractional flow reserve. I think as far as the cath lab experience goes, the fellows definitely get enough cath lab. In fact, we've had to ratchet back because they're probably getting too much, and they need time for imaging and heart failure and EP and other areas. But I don't think that's been a problem as far as the busyness. And the VA, I should say too, has been a leader in both structural and coronary. The VA was the first one to do TAVR in the United States, and we've had a tradition of that, as well as doing a lot of complex coronary interventions over there. And we have a very close relationship with our cardiac surgeons, both at Stanford and at the VA. So it's a nice collaboration, heart team approach to finding the best strategies for managing these complex patients.
And I also want you to highlight a little bit the cognitive approach to, the cath lab. And one of the things I remember is the didactic sessions. For 50 years, there's been a joint conference with the cardiac surgeons, and maybe speak to a little bit about that side of the education experience.
We have a great cath conference that happens about once a week, or maybe three times a month. And traditionally it was on Saturday mornings. And finally, a few years ago, we were able to switch that because those of us who have kids and whatnot, we made it a little challenging. But we do it on Monday mornings now, and most recently it's via Zoom. But it's a great conference involving cardiac surgery as well as interventional cardiology, but also general cardiology and non-invasive, and having people like yourself and David Marin and others join the call, as well as our heart failure experts. Or when we get back into in-person meetings, being in the room, it's always a really lively discussion. I get a lot of different viewpoints about how to manage these patients, and it's all case-based and real world cases. And then we try to tie in some didactics regarding one of the cases that might be interesting, and update on latest approaches or medical management or whatever is relevant.
I'm sure that you've been approached many times about other opportunities, but we've been really happy and excited that you're going to be taking on a new role at the VA. Maybe tell us a little bit about your role you're taking on and your vision for what that's going to look like, especially for our fellows.
I'm going to be the head of the cardiology section there at the VA, and I've been going to the VA. I started out as a junior faculty member, going there twice a week and working in the cath lab, and that eventually transitioned to just once a week because things got busier at Stanford. But now I'm going to transition back to spending a lot more time there at the VA, and I'm really excited about it. I think the opportunities are endless. The special things to me about the VA are the people, both from the standpoint of the faculty and staff. We really have top-notch faculty and staff, and people who really care about the patients, which is so important. The other aspect are the patients. So the vets are just terrific people, and they're very giving and unselfish, and also clearly have a lot of cardiac disease. So it's a very, very good population for clinical research. And so one of my goals is to further grow the clinical research infrastructure there at the VA. We've had a lot of success, but I think we have even more opportunities, not only in the cath lab, but also in imaging and heart failure and transplant. So that'll be one key goal. We'll also grow the clinical programs. We have had very great success with TAVR, but we need to grow our other structural heart programs like mitral and tricuspid interventions. We're going to further grow the EP program under the leadership of Mintu Tarakia, and the transplant and heart failure program too. Finally, the imaging, CT and MRI programs are growing, but I think we have a lot of room there. We have one unique aspect at the VA, in that there's a CT scanner right adjacent to the two cath labs. And so that really gives us a lot of potential for doing clinical research in the non-invasive imaging. So those are some of the ideas. I think there are some specific programs like a women's heart health program at the VA. More and more women vets are getting their care at the Palo Alto VA. So that's something we're going to introduce, as well as a preventive cardiology program. So
I think
we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it should be a lot of fun.
Thank you for talking and spending some time. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I think I would just like to thank the fellows who are joining, or the fellow applicants, I should say, who are joining this too, for their time. We're really excited about what's going on at Stanford, and think this is a great place to start your careers, and hope you find it that way as well. And if you have any questions, reach out to any of us, because we're always willing to talk about Stanford.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. please visit us at med.stanford.edu.